Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We're so pleased to have you with us this morning. And I know we're going to have a lively discussion with a lot of questions coming from the committee. I want us to start with a very specific issue that actually relates to the wonderful visit we had with you in the state of Maine, and that's regarding the Indian Boarding School Initiative. In fiscal year 2022, Congress provided $7 million for the Indian Boarding School Initiative, and I know this initiative is a personal priority for you. Last June, you and I had the wonderful experience when you visited Acadia National Park of joining with Wabanaki and other tribal leaders in Maine to welcome the sun, which I think was around 4 o'clock in the morning, a very early start to our day, and take part in a talking circle with the tribal leaders. They shared their experiences with the devastating intergenerational trauma that has been caused by these Indian boarding schools. Immediately after that visit, you signed a secretarial order requiring the department to create a plan for the Indian Boarding School Initiative. I appreciate that you've done this. I want to commend you for that. And I just want to hear a little more about the progress that's been made by the department. So can you talk about that to us, about the department's work on this initiative that is so important? How are the funds we provided being used to support the initiative? I understand a report is being prepared, and I'm curious to know when that will be finalized. So would love to hear from you on that.
Thank you very much, Chair Pingree. And yes, thank you. The trip to your state was really a wonderful experience for me, and I appreciated your hosting us. So thank you very much. And I appreciate your interest and the committee's interest in this issue. Some of you may have read my op-ed. I talked about my grandparents being taken away from their families when they were both 8 years old and sent to boarding school for 5 years, away from their mothers, away from their community. So it's important for me to make sure that people know that we care about this issue, that we are doing something about it, giving them a chance to heal from this intergenerational trauma. We are working on the boarding school initiative. It should be out very soon. We expect it to be out very soon. We're incredibly grateful for the $7 million in the 2022 funding. Thank you very much for that. That will help us to continue to work on this issue. Part of it is making sure that we are really connecting with tribes. Tribal consultation has been very important in this to make sure that we are doing what various tribes would like us to do. Tribes have different customs, different traditions. Some may want to repatriate or, bring back their, children who have been buried away from their homelands. They may want to bring them back. They may not want to. So it will depend on what each individual tribe wants to do. But I think the initial start in getting a full listing of exactly what federal boarding schools were in this country, where burial sites are, what tribes were relegated to these various boarding schools. Those are the important facts that we are working on now, and we'll get out soon. And of course, we'll update you when we have some news about the rollout of the first report.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. I will now turn over to the Ranking Member Joyce to see if he has any questions.
Just a few. Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, Secretary Haaland, the President on day one issued an executive order temporarily banning new oil and gas leasing on the federal estate and directed the department to conduct a thorough review. The department delivered its report last November. It has been almost 18 months since the lease sale has been signed on the federal estate. On April 18th, the White House press secretary reiterated that the administration's policy is to ban additional oil and gas leasing on federal lands. As you also know, the law requires quarterly lease sales. Can you please clarify the administration's position? And if the law requires the administration to conduct oil and gas leasing, how can it be the administration's policy to ban such leasing?
Ranking Member Joyce, thank you so much for the question. And as you may know, the department was required by a federal court injunction, which the department is appealing, to move forward with onshore oil and gas leases. But knowing that we had to move forward, we made sure that the lease sales reflected the highest and best use of public lands. I've said many times that our public lands belong to every single American. And so we felt the need to include significant reforms that would benefit taxpayers. We want to make sure that we're consulting with tribes, taking climate change into account, because this is really the challenge of our time. I will continue to implement the oil and gas program in a way that is consistent with the law and with my authority as secretary. I'm not able to make specific announcements right now, but please know that there are about 9,000 permits currently available that have not been drilled to the oil companies, as well as 11 million acres of land that has been leased. So I feel that the industry is set, and we're continuing to work in the best way possible.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot. Unfortunately, if by regulation and design they can't exercise those leases and execute on those leases, the fact we have 9,000 leases doesn't make a lot of differences to our supply. But if it's the department's recent announcement for limited onshore leasing is driven by a court order, then it isn't fair to say that the administration would still have a ban on new leasing if it weren't for the courts. And if so, then why does the ban continue even after the department delivered its report pursuant to the executive order?
With all due respect, Ranking Member Joyce, there is no ban on leasing right now. And the 9,000 permits, those have already been approved, and the industry is free to use those permits in the way they see fit. They just haven't acted on those. Permitting actually continues on the land that has already been leased. And so, as I mentioned, I feel the industry is set, and in fact, production is essentially higher than it's been in a couple decades. So, on the federal lands, we're doing what we need to do, and we're following the law and making sure that we are moving those issues forward.
I beg to differ with you, Madam Secretary, but I will yield back, Madam Chair, because I know other members of this fine committee all want to ask questions as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joyce. Chair McCollum, do you have questions this morning?
Yes, I do. And first, to my fellow committee members, I apologize for the shaky connection we had yesterday. Secretary Haaland, we are so happy to have you back. And I'm proud, very proud of the increases that this subcommittee provided under the leadership of Chair Pingree for 2022. Using the 2023 budget request as a base, I hope we can build on that success to deliver more resources to implement the department's broad mission, including the conservation of our public lands and ecosystem, protecting biodiversity, endangered species, and addressing climate change with scientific research. But I'm going to focus on a part of the Interior's budget that funds our trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations, the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Education. First, I want to applaud you and President Biden for listening to tribal leaders who have advocated for embracing and expanding the Tawahi Initiative. Fiscal year 2023 budget request will not only sustain funding for existing Tawahi sites, including Red Lake Nation in Minnesota, but allow for additional tribal nations to participate in this holistic, culturally affirming approach to family and community. The president's budget also includes significant increases for the Bureau of Indian Education construction. This committee, as you know, works in a very strong bipartisan, I say nonpartisan fashion, and we have prioritized children because we believe no child should attend a school with exposed wires, cracked walls, insufficient heat or air conditioning, many of the problems that we see in BIE schools. So the FY22 funding that this subcommittee provided BIE replacement projects will fund the completion of 3 schools. The 23 proposal would fund an additional 6. But we know that there's still not enough funding to fill out the priority list. Could you let us know how the department's looking at issuing new priority replacement school lists to inform tribal leaders and this subcommittee, which schools are next in line. And I want to make it clear, I wish every single school was next in line, but I know you're faced with hard choices.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. And I appreciate you caring so much about Indian country in this way. Yes, we wish we could replace every single school, as that needs to be replaced as well. But for the time being, there will be 6 replacement school projects to be started in 2023. The Cheyenne Eagle Butte School in South Dakota, the Cottonwood Day School in Arizona, the Little Wound Day School in South Dakota, Standing Rock Community School in New Mexico, Pierre Indian Learning Center in South Dakota, and Santa Rosa Day School in Arizona. There are many more. It will take us, a couple decades to, at this funding level, to get to the schools that need to be replaced as a priority. We'll continue to work on that as we can, but certainly recognize the need in Indian country for children to attend schools that are safe and, a place where they can truly learn.
Serving on the authorization committee currently this year, as well as on the appropriations committee that oversees this, I hesitate to speak for Mr. Simpson, but we've traveled in Indian country ourselves. We've seen the condition of the schools and the roads, and whatever authority you need in order to hold contractors accountable and have better contract outcomes is something that I know I would look forward to working with you on. Mr. Calvert, when he was chair, we were just shocked at the condition at which some of the schools actually were built at. With not having the right kind of oversight on construction done by the Bureau. So if you need more authority with that or something different in the contracts, please let us know so we can be of help. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. Do you have questions this morning?
Yes, thank you. I agree with what Representative McCollum just said about the schools and the need to address those. And, we can't wait 2 decades. That's somebody's born and they become an adult before we've improved their school. That's just too long. We've got to do something about this. But let me first of all, Secretary, thank you for your participation with CEQ and with other agencies in addressing a perplexing problem in the Pacific Northwest dealing with salmon and salmon recovery of the endangered species up there, and the importance that is to the tribes and actually to all of the Pacific Northwest. So I appreciate your participation in that collaboration that you're working on. Let me ask a couple of questions first. With the 6% increase we had last year and the 12% proposed this year, we're still facing a real challenge, and that is with finding employees. Everywhere I go, not just in Idaho, but across the country, BLM, other agencies, and this is not just a interior problem. I also find it in the Department of Agriculture with ARS or the Forest Service or others. We're having trouble getting our job done because we can't get the employees, or we're so behind on employees. What's the problem there? Are we having problems hiring people to do the jobs and stuff? As an example, when we authorized the Great American Outdoors Act, there's an awful lot of programs in there that we wanted to see started and stuff, but they're telling me that the delays in getting the projects approved and stuff are because we don't have the employees to approve those projects and stuff. What's the problem there?
Thank you so much for the question, Congressman Simpson. And thank you for recognizing this issue. As I'm traveling across the country, everywhere I go, I make it a point to meet personally with DOI employees. We have some of the best employees, I think, in the federal government, very dedicated workforce, dedicated to our mission. And I know it's a priority for me, working to build up our workforce capacity across the department. We have a special emphasis right now in certain areas. One is wildland fire, and you probably have seen the wildland fires across the Southwest right now, namely in my state of New Mexico. So the wildfire preparedness in the BLM is something that we're paying very close attention to and working to fulfill. The new being able to pay firefighters a little bit more money is helping us to recruit some folks there. And also with the land management bureaus and national parks and national wildlife refuges, you probably have seen that there's been up to a 60% increase in visitation in some of these areas across the country, namely since COVID happened. People just find the need to get outdoors more than they have been in the past. So those are all priorities for us. We're going to focus on positions needed to break log jams in human resources and contracting. We're expanding access to qualified candidate lists across the bureaus. And in some cases, we're working with OPM to address competitive hiring markets. So we'll continue to pay attention to this. I appreciate your interest in it. We're always happy to make sure that we give you updates. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And if we have anything else to add, we'll absolutely keep you informed.
Well, I appreciate that. But basically, we can put all the money into a program in the world. If we don't have the personnel to carry out the projects and so forth that's necessary, it doesn't really do any good. So those personnel and making sure that we have sufficient personnel in the right areas is something that is critical for us. And along those same lines, you talked about paying firefighters. I went out to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation where we did a community finance project to help them rebuild their fire station out there that needed to get done. What I found out from the policemen and the firemen out there, one of their biggest challenges is they're the training ground for local community fire stations in Blackfoot, Pocatello, Idaho Falls. They train them in Fort Hall. As soon as they get trained, they get hired at a higher pay rate in Blackfoot or in Pocatello and leave. So how do we keep those? And we'll talk about this later because my time is running out. But we've got to find a way to keep these people on the reservation, be able to pay them enough so that they can stay with the organizations that have trained them. But we'll talk about that later. Yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. That's certainly an issue I've heard about, so I hope we'll get a chance to discuss that. Next, Mr. Kilmer, you have questions this morning.
I do. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Madam Secretary, for being with us and for your leadership and your commitment to ensuring the federal government fulfills its unmet treaty and trust responsibilities to Native American communities. I'm really grateful for your visit out to my neck of the woods last summer to tour the Quinault Indian Nation's Taholah Village relocation project, which is an effort to move that village to higher ground in response to increasing threats from climate change and rising sea levels and erosion and flooding and tsunami risk. Thank you for coming to see these challenges firsthand and meeting with tribal leaders from across the region I represent. And as you'll recall, it's not just the Quinault that face urgent and existential threats exacerbated by climate change, as you heard during your visit. The Quileute Tribal School in La Push is in the crosshairs of a rising ocean. The Ho Indian tribe is located in a tsunami flood zone, and the only developed road in and out of the reservation is regularly impassable as a result of heavy storms. And the Makah Indian tribe urgently needs to relocate their health center, which is not only in a tsunami zone, but also a cell and internet service shadow that impedes emergency communication. So climate change and coastal challenges are real threats, and they also threaten significant cultural landmarks and heritage. Just earlier this week, I spoke with several tribal historic preservation officers who perform critical work protecting important cultural sites. They told me that increasing erosion caused by rising oceans have exposed ancestral remains and resting places. Unfortunately, they don't have the resources they need to monitor and mitigate that erosion risk. So I share these details in part because I want to just emphasize the sheer need and the importance of urgent and bold action. And I know that you share that sense of urgency. And it's why I appreciate your commitment to addressing climate challenges and building resilient communities during your first year as secretary and in this year's budget proposal. I'm glad you specifically highlighted the $62 million for the tribal climate resilience program in this year's budget request, which is almost double the 2022 enacted level. I'm also pleased that this committee passed nearly $3.6 million in community project funding to help with the relocation efforts of 3 tribes in my neck of the woods that are trying to move to higher ground. But I think we know that addressing these challenges fully will require significant investment above and beyond what we've done so far. As NCAI President and Quinault Vice President Fawn Sharp testified to our committee earlier this month, the cost of the Quinault relocation project alone is $180 million. So we're talking about literally relocating entire communities. That's homes and schools and health clinics and justice centers and community centers and more. So I want to hear your thoughts on how your agency and the Biden administration can work with Congress to develop and execute a more comprehensive and coordinated plan to help tribes that are facing imminent displacement from their ancestral homelands and their territory that they have occupied since time immemorial due to climate change and coastal erosion. And secondly, what do you need from us? What does the administration need from this subcommittee so that we can be good partners to you in this effort?
Thank you very much, Congressman, and thank you for your dedication to Indian country, not only in your district, but across the country. It's very much appreciated, given the mission of the Department of the Interior. Yes, everything you said, I completely agree with, especially the part about me coming to your district. Thank you for being such a wonderful host, and thoroughly enjoyed that opportunity to be with the chair and the vice chair. Funding is one thing. Yes, it's an expensive undertaking. There are tribes in Alaska as well that are falling victim to coastal erosion. As you can imagine, a lot of those communities are on permafrost that is melting currently. And all the funding in the world would really certainly help these tribes when they need to relocate. But I think one of the most important things that you spoke about and that we are committed to is tribal consultation. These tribes, that's their ancestral homeland. They don't know where to live anywhere else. And I mean, often, yes, tribes have been relocated at the behest of the federal government, but for certain tribes who have been in the same place since time immemorial, it's a very difficult it's emotional and it's a spiritual, it's a shot to their spiritual well-being when they have to move from a land that means a tremendous amount to them. So absolutely putting tribal consultation as a priority is something that we feel very committed to. It's, how does the tribe want to move, to go about this move? How do they want to plan and where do they want to plan? These are all things that we have to take into consideration, and we do that. Later this summer, BIA will announce bipartisan infrastructure law allocations for community relocation demonstration pilot sites. That's one thing. Given the estimated $5 billion cost to relocate communities, for example, in Alaska and the lower 48, we will need your help. So we'd love to make sure we're staying in touch with you. I also want to add that President Biden has charged us all with an all-of-government approach to Indian country. It's not just the Department of the Interior that is working on these issues. It's every other department. It's the Department of Education. When schools need to move, it's the EPA, it's the Department of Energy, it's housing. All of us are charged with ensuring that we're giving Indian country what they need. And certainly when a whole community is relocating, all of us will be responsible for making sure that is a successful move. So, of course, we're always here to discuss this with you further. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can answer any specific questions. And I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us a little extra time on this subject. Thank you.
It's an important topic, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. Mr. Stewart, do you have questions this morning?
I do. Thanks, Chairwoman, and Madam Secretary, thanks for joining with us, and thanks for the work that you do. You'll forgive me, I want to emphasize my agreement with Ranking Member Joyce and his concerns regarding energy and oil production in the West. I mean, one of the first things the administration did was, we could argue over the numbers of whether they shut it down or just made it very, very restrictive, but oil and gas permitting in the West, ANWR offshore, A greater concern is the demonization of oil and gas industry, which is an industry that every American depends on, and the attempts to demonetize and make it hard for them to get financing that they need. And the bottom line, Madam Secretary, is it leads to, as has been pointed out, nearly doubling in oil and gas prices and energy prices. And if you're a working family, if you're the working poor, this is a real challenge for people. And so we hope we can work with you in the future as we try to take advantage of our own natural resources here. And so we don't have to go to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Iran and ask them to increase their gas and oil production. Two questions for you, if I could, Madam Secretary. And I think there are things that we can work together on, at least I hope they can. They're local issues, but very important to my constituents. One of a good friend of mine, one of the great sheriffs that we have in my district, and I would argue, in the entire state or country, is a friend of mine, Sheriff Perkins. Calf Creek Falls is a beautiful area in southern Utah. It's part of the Grand Escalante National Monument. It's such a beautiful place that it's an area that I have asked that we could designate as a national park. Many, many visitors take the 3-hour hike to Calf Creek Falls. It's very, very remote, as you can imagine, and very difficult to provide search and rescue, and in many cases, the actual rescue. It's so difficult that Sheriff Perkins can't get volunteers to go make these, carry people out who have been sick or injured. 3 hours to get in, more than 3 hours to get out. It takes a 12-man team. And as I said, he just can't get people to do it. It's so difficult, so dangerous, so exhausting. Here's a very simple solution. All we have to do is clear out some willows. We don't have to do any excavation. We don't have to build any structures, cut any trees. If we could just clear out some willows, we could provide a landing area for rescue helicopters, which could do this flight in about 20 minutes. And yet we've been unable to do that. It really is a life or death situation. Madam Secretary, can we count on you to work with us to implement a solution that we know will save lives and make this area actually safer and more accessible to people?
Thank you very much, Congressman. And I appreciate knowing about this. Of course, we're always willing to talk with you. We're always willing to work with you. We feel very committed to safety of any American who is out in a outdoor federal space. If we can follow up with you on this issue, we'd be more than happy to. Yeah. There's probably a lot more to it than just thinking about all the things involved with an issue like that. We'd be more than happy to follow up with you on it.
Okay, thank you. And that's what I was hoping you'd say. And I suspected you wouldn't be aware of this issue. There's no way you could be. It was, as I say, a local issue. And Madam Secretary, again, if we were asking for, great excavation or a change of the landscape or anything like that, I would understand the hesitancy of the administration, but it really is a simple solution. It's just some willows that we would be able to clear, and it'd be, as I said, it really is a life or death situation now. One other thing, if I could mention it really quickly in the 55 seconds that I have left, and again, this is something that we would look forward to working with you, and that is we have a bit of a conflict in Bryce Canyon National Park. We have concessionaires, which we support, and I know that you do as well. They take these animals, take horse guides down the trails. There's a bit of a conflict between the concessionaires and then a large number of private individuals who are doing the same thing. We think it's become a bit of a safety issue as well, and we would ask once again your commitment to work with us to try to find a solution that enhances the experience for people, but also leads to additional safety.
Absolutely. Very happy to follow up with you on this. As you know, we're very proud that we now have a National Park Service Director, Chuck Sams. He's top notch. I'll make sure that we are in touch with you about this issue.
Thank you so much for your help. We look forward to working with you, and thanks, Madam Chair.